It might finally be hoodie season here in Dallas, Texas. I've got my hoodie on today. It's a beautiful day and a great day to play some cards. So yesterday we had a little bit of an unlucky session where we turned a flush against a set and they boated up on the river. So today, hoping to play well and win some nice pots and hopefully, as always, get some good hands for the vlog. So I'll see you guys inside TCH Social for some 1-2 no limit hold'em. All right, I am back for another session at Las Colinas TCH Social for some 1-2 no limit hold'em 300 max buy-in poker. Let's get into some hands. In one of the very first hands I get involved with, there's a limp under the gun and it folds to me in the low jack and I look down at the beautiful 8-7 of clubs. I'm still getting my feet wet, I just sat down and I don't know the table very well, but I will quickly find out that this table is very, very loose, passive, and very call-y pre-flop. So at the time I raised to 12, but quickly found out I would have to make it much bigger to try and isolate and get heads up or at least go 3 ways to the flop. But in this case, I pick up 5 callers, so we are going to go 6 ways to a flop of 10-6 deuce with 1 club. It checks over to me and I have 8 high. I don't have showdown value. I do have probably one of my better bluffs in this spot because I do have equity and backdoor opportunities because I do have equity with my gut shot straight draw and my backdoor flush possibilities. So I put in a bet of $20. Planning on barreling a lot of good turn cards like any flush card or card that upgrades my straight draw. I pick up 2 callers, so we're gonna go 3 ways to a turn card, and it is probably one of the worst cards for me to continue barreling. It is the 10 of spades. So I shut down and check. My opponent to my left checks as well, so we head to a river card, which is a 6 of diamonds. It checks around yet again, and my opponent to my left had ace jack offsuit, so she takes it down with ace high. I guess when it checked around on the turn, I could have considered bluffing the river. However, against 2 opponents, I thought it was too likely I would get called, especially because I shut down on the turn. So we're gonna move on to the next one. In this hand, I look down at Queen 9 of spades and the low jack and I raise to $15. The button and the small blind calls, so we're gonna go 3 ways to a flop of Queen 9 6 with 2 hearts. So we flop ourselves top 2 pair on this pretty wet and dynamic board. Because this is a board we're not gonna be betting with our entire range, we're either gonna bet a little bit bigger or check. And in this case, I choose a bet size of $35. Both players call, so we're gonna go 3 ways to a turn card, which is the Jack of Hearts. This is one of the worst cards I could see. It does complete a gut shot like King 10, but worse than that, it completes the front door heart flush. So I check, my left checks, and then the button puts out a pretty small bet of $20. Throughout this vlog, you're going to see me talk about this rec player quite a bit as we get involved in many hands. He's been tending to call pretty much any raise pre-flop and just there to gamble and have fun, but he seems very new to poker. I see him do some pretty unorthodox things. I've seen him bet when he has a very nutted hand and he would bet on the larger side. So this bet seems a little bit weak, more like a blocker bet type sizing. He only has $60 behind, and I think if the player on my left had a flush, we would have heard about it, so I'm not too concerned about him. So because my other opponent only has 60 behind, I decide to go all in. We have 2 pair, we can probably get called by some worse hands, or just deny equity against hands that have a single heart in them. The player to my left surely does fold, and now it's on the button, and he tanks for almost over 2 minutes. He finally flicks in the call, so we're running it once on the river, and it's the 3 of hearts. I thought it was probably one of the worst cards in the deck we could have possibly seen. However, I flip over my hand and my opponent flips over Queen 9 offsuit. So we almost got him to fold the same hand. I like my shove. It puts pressure on him, especially because he only had $60 behind, but we're gonna chop this one up. In this hand, we get to start our fun adventure with Mr. Rec Player as he raises to $10 under the gun. Middle position then makes the call. He hasn't been putting in any 3 bets, just been calling pre-flop and seems to play a little bit straightforward. And then I look down at King Jack offsuit in the cutoff. Normally I'd prefer to either fold or 3-bet this hand, however at the time I was thinking I wouldn't mind playing an in-position pot against the rec player. I have to assume his range might be a little bit stronger raising under the gun, and to note he hasn't been raising a lot, he's just been doing a lot of limping and calling pre-flop. So I decided to try and take this one post-flop and see if we can navigate and outplay post. So I make the call and we go 3 ways to a flop of 4, 6, 7 rainbow. Now under the gun checks, and when he checks, I don't think he's doing this with a balanced range. I think he's doing this because he just whiffed the flop with a hand like maybe ace high, or you know what, who knows what he has. He's been doing a lot of unconventional things. Middle position checks as well, so I would expect middle position to start leading here when the under the gun player checks with all of his pairs, his made hands, hands like pocket 8s, 9s, and hands like suited connectors like 8-9 suited, 7-6 suited for 2 pair, pretty much all of his made hands, I think he might start betting in this spot. So when he checks, it's on me and I have to decide what hands I'm going to start bluffing. This is in theory a great board for me to start bluffing on. I have king high, don't have a lot of showdown value. I can turn a good hand if a jack or a king comes, but overall this is just a great board for me to assert aggression. We can do a lot of things on a lot of different turn cards, and we can put a lot of pressure on the under the gun player, being that he probably doesn't have a made hand at this point. So I'm going to start bluffing and I put in a bet of $26. The under the gun player calls and the middle position player calls, so we are going to go 3 ways to a turn card, which is the 8 of spades, bringing in a spade flush draw and some straight possibilities. Now under the gun checks yet again, and middle position checks as well, and now it's my turn. Once again, I think I'm facing 2 ranges that don't have a nutted hand. Under the gun was probably calling with a hand like ace jack, ace queen, ace king, something like that. Middle position is really virtually the only hand I'm worried about in this spot, as he still can have some hands like pocket nines, possibly even could have a hand like 8-9, but mostly probably just has a somewhat weak holding. So we're going to continue our aggression and rep that we have a straight, a set, or 2 pair on this board. Also, being in the cutoff, I'm the one most likely to have a nutted hand on this board, as I can be flatting really wide given that I have position, so I bet $65. Under the gun finally lets his hand go, so my plan is coming together. The middle position player thinks and thinks he has about $200 behind. He finally lands on a call, so now we are headed to a river card, which is the 10 of clubs, and he checks it over to me yet again. This is actually a really great card because we do block the super nuts being jack 9, and now we can rep more nutted hands. If I had a hand like 8-9, we now have a higher straight if he somehow had a 5. So we're going to follow through with our triple barrel bluff here with our king high, and we're going to stick it all in for about $150 effective. My opponent goes well into the tank, thinking, not sure if he wants to call it off or not. I'm just hoping it gets through. However, whether we get it through or not, I'm indifferent. We have king high, I know we have the worst hand, we have to put in a bluff, and we have such an advantage on this board texture. So he thinks, and then he finally lands on a fold. We get the triple barrel bluff through with our king high, and we pick up a very, very nice pot, and I was pretty happy about this one. In this hand, under the gun raises to $15. I'm 2 to her left and look down at ace king offsuit, so I put in the 3-bet to 50. It folds all the way back around to her, she makes the call, so we're gonna go heads up to a flop of jack 3-3 with 2 hearts. She checks it over to me, and at the time I thought I was supposed to put in about a 30% pot bet. However, after looking this hand up, it seems like the solver likes to go a little bit bigger. I do bet 30 and she makes the call. We head to a turn card, which is the 3 of diamonds. She checks it over to me, and now, as you can see, we can go either way here with ace-king offsuit exactly between betting or checking. I have to assume she has somewhat of a stronger range, raising under the gun and then calling a 3-bet, so she is still going to have some stronger pocket pairs. She's also going to have some hands like ace-queen, ace-jack, etc., and some heart draws. I still can be ahead of a lot of her range, even hands like ace-queen offsuit I'm still ahead of, so I don't think our hand always has to bet in this spot. If it was a different turn card, I would have definitely probably continued barreling, but I do elect to check, so we head to a river card, which is the deuce of diamonds. And now my opponent bets $50. In theory, I know this is a snap call as played, especially when we check the turn, but I do have to stop and think about it just a bit. But it's really hard for my opponent to have a super strong hand here unless she has exactly a hand like a jack. She could be putting in a value bet with a hand like pocket tens if she thinks my turn check is capping me at a hand like ace king or ace queen. However, I think I just have to put in the call for this price, given my hand is the strongest ace high. So I do put in the call, and she flips over ace king offsuit, so we are gonna chop this one up. In this hand, there's a dealer change. That means it's time for a double board $5 no limit bomb pot. And in this one, I get dealt 7-8 of diamonds, and there's 2 boards. The first one is 5 jack 6 with 1 diamond, and the second board is 5 9 10 with 3 diamonds. So we flop an open ender on the top board, and we flop a flush with a straight flush redraw on the second board. It checks around to me, and I bet $25. Only one opponent calls me, so we head to 2 turn cards, one being the 5 of hearts and the other one being a 6. My opponent has a little less than $100 behind, so I just jam all in. She calls, and lucky for us, she has 7-8 offsuit, so we are going to take 75% of this pot, being that we have a flush on the bottom board and straight on the top. So now our stack is up to over $500. We are in for $300, so we're headed in the right direction. In In this hand, I raise ace queen of clubs in early position to $15, the cutoff, the button, and the small blind call, so we're going to go 4 ways to a flop of 993. It checks over to me, and we're going to be checking our range out of position, I think, on this texture, facing this many opponents, so I like to check. The flop checks through, and we head to a turn card, which is another 9. And now the rec player, he bets $15. I call, and the player to my left calls, so we're going to head to a river card, which is the 5 of clubs, and we check it over to the rec player yet again, and he bets $25. So here's the thing, I've seen this guy put in small bets as bluffs on the river. Sure, a lot of the time I'm just going to be beat here by some random 3 or some random 5, possibly even a hand like pocket 5s, 6s, etc. But we have a really good ace high, and we are beating a lot of his bluffs that come from jack highs, queen highs, and king highs. So I'm going to flick in a call and see what he has. The other player folds, and my opponent shows deuce 3 offsuit. So goes to show you, this rec player is playing a wide range of hands, clearly pretty much playing any 2, and he got me good on this one, and we'll try to get him in the next hand. In this hand, under the gun one, who is a pretty loose opener, has been very aggressive, raising pre-flop and putting in 3 bets, he makes it $15. I'm next to act and look down at queen jack offsuit. Definitely not a hand I want to flat. I also don't really feel like folding, and I think against this loose open, we can take it down a ton either pre-flop or post-flop, so I 3-bet to $45. He makes the call, and we're going to go heads up to a flop of queen 6-7 with 2 clubs. He checks it over to me, and now on this board, we actually flop a really good hand with a pair of queens and a jack kicker. I put out a bet of $20, and my opponent folds pretty quickly, and we take down the pot. In this hand, there's not too much to talk about, but there's a limp under the gun, the button raises to $15, the small blind calls, and then I look down at pocket deuces in the big blind. We don't have the immediate odds to make the call here, as we're likely behind currently, but we do have the implied odds to flop a set and set mine. So I make the call, the under the gun limper makes the call, so we are going to go 4 ways to a flop of king jack 5 with 2 spades. I have to check fold, unfortunately, as we whiff, but I think it's important to note that you might not have the immediate odds, but if you're deep stacked enough, you definitely have the implied odds to try and flop a set and win a big pot. In this hand, we play another pot against the rec player, and by the way, when I say rec player, it is in no way a negative term. It's just a player who plays for fun or who is learning the game, fairly new to it, and it's honestly very rejuvenating to see players like this at the table. It reminds me back when I first started playing poker, and the excitement, the rush, and just getting to know the game and familiar with the chips, the cards, the way the action goes. It's just a fun thing to see players like this come into the game, and you always want to make sure they have a great time, allow them to have fun and learn the game and love the game, so they'll come back and continue to play and have a good time. So I did have a blast playing against this player, so I hope you guys know in no way does rec player mean anything negative. It purely just means a recreational poker player. So I look down at ace king of diamonds under the gun, and I raise to $15. Only the recreational player calls, so we are going to go heads up to a flop of 9-6 deuce with 2 diamonds. So we flop a monster hand here with 2 overs and the nut flush draw. So with this exact hand on this exact board, I am going to continue betting. My hand can totally withstand a raise, of course, so we're willing to put chips in the pot with this hand. So I bet $15. My opponent makes the call, so we head to a turn card, which is the ace of spades. So now we have upgraded our hand to top pair, top kicker, and the nut flush draw. We have this board locked up, however, against this particular opponent who has been calling so many bets and just staying in pots when maybe he shouldn't, we can continue to go for value against this opponent. So I bet $45. My opponent goes into the tank and thinks and thinks and thinks, and then finally tosses his hand in face up, and guess what he had? 7-8 offsuit, and I was honestly shocked to see him fold that because I had seen him arrive to river cards with hands that were way worse than an open ender. So a very, very surprising fold here by my opponent. I guess he knew he just was drawing pretty thin. He makes a good fold, all things considered, and we're gonna pick up this pot and move on to the next one. In this hand, there's a raise under the gun by the rec player to $10. It folds around to me on the button, and I look down at king 7 of spades. I'm happy to peel here, playing an in-position pot against the rec player, so I make the call. The small blind comes along as well, so we're going to go 3 ways to a flop of king 10-6. It checks over to me, and I have to assume I have the best hand, flopping a pair of kings, so I bet $15 for value. Both players call, so now we head to a turn card, which is an ace. They check it over to me, and now we're going to check and evaluate river cards and try to get to a showdown. The river is another ace, and now the under the gun player bets $20. I think my hand is a bit too strong to make the fold, so I put in the call, and then the small blind calls as well. The under the gun player shows pocket jacks, and then the small blind flips over king 10, and I flip over my king 7, so apparently we were saved by this run out because we are going to chop this one up with the small blind. In the last hand of the night, the under the gun rec player limps $2. Then a player in middle position raises to 13, and it folds around to me in the big blind, and I look down at ace queen offsuit. Our hand is definitely good enough to put in the 3-bet. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger being out of position, so I raise to $45. Then the under the gun limper decides to call, a thorn in my side as I'm always out of position against him in this session. And then the original raiser folds, so we are going to go heads up to a flop of 7-5-7 with 2 diamonds. Against this particular player, I think I'm going to be ahead here against a lot of his range, so I want to get value and keep all of his worst hands in, and he loves to call bets. He doesn't like to fold, so I put in a value bet of $30 with my ace high. He makes the call, so we are going to head to a turn card, which is the queen of spades, so now we have a very, very nice hand. In real time, I was thinking I could continue going for value, however, at this point, I'm either way ahead or way behind to a hand like a 7x holding, or my opponent just has a flush draw that he's going to continue calling bets with. In real time, I decided on a bet of $80. My opponent thinks for a really long time and then folds ace-jack offsuit face up, so maybe we do check there and try to either induce a bluff on the river or bet for value, but either way, we do win our very last pot of the night with ace-queen off.
Alright, so today went a lot better than yesterday. We were in the game for $300, cashed out with $520 for a profit of $220. And honestly, I won a lot of pots today that I shouldn't have won, and then made some calls like with the ace king. So lucky to have won the pots that I did today, and I felt like I played pretty solid. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the vlog. If you did, would you do me a huge favor and go all in and like, comment, subscribe? It would mean the world to me. We're just getting started. It's only up from here, and I will see you guys next time.